Good morning and welcome to Wise Women Weekdays. I'm Lucinda Wild. I'm here with Oliver Perceval. I wasn't sure whether I should introduce your second name or not, so that's
all right.
paused.
Yeah.
And another wise woman. Good morning, Danielle.
So today we're going to talk about, remind me, it's something to do with the Alexa plugs.
Your Alexa. Electromagnetic radiation.
Yes, that's it.
Yes. We are. Because...
Well, I've got a great interest in electromagnetic radiation because I'm a holistic health practitioner, and some of the teachers I had were very, very convinced that they had managed to get people really on the path to wellness only through dramatically reducing their exposure to certain forms of electromagnetic radiation. And Ollie here is an expert, so I'd love to hear what he thinks.
Yeah, so would I, because my house seems to be full of
bits and bobs.
Yes, that have electromagnetic radiation.
So what do you have in your house?
Well, I've got hue lights everywhere, a Sonos system with Alexa in the Sonos plugs, not the plugs, Alexa in the Sonos system, and Alexa plugs, but they don't work anymore. They all kind of, unsynced or whatever, and I thought, well, I'm not going to, I just left them in the plug sockets, but they still emit radiation.
And what about your electricity? Do you have a smart meter or is it a normal?
No smart meter.
Oh, well done.
Yes, I'm not having a smart meter.
So that sounded pretty convinced.
Yes, yeah, because they're not good, are they?
No. I mean, Ollie, over to you.
What are your suspicions of smart meters? What makes you cautious?
It's like they could have absolute control over your electricity at any time. So if they wanted to plunge us all into a blackout or shut down internet, whatever, they can stop the electricity supply.
Yeah.
And I believe they can, besides any health effects, they can also monitor exactly when you're having a cup of coffee, when you're having a shower, when you go into the bathroom in the middle of the night and switch the light on. Everything. So it's the most amazing source of consumer data, which is neither here nor there. But so from a health point of view, and Oliver, maybe you want to talk about that, they give off thousands of tiny pulses, don't they?
Yeah. So we can include smart meters in what we talk about.
Yes.
And so to preface it all, I wouldn't claim to be an expert. It's a funny word, expert. It's very devalued actually these days.
Yes.
I wouldn't claim to be an expert, but certainly an enthusiast. And
yes.
I do have a professional background, which is relevant.
Okay.
Not as an engineer, but as an architect.
Okay.
So that's why 20 years ago, I got interested in the electromagnetic aspect of healthy buildings.
Yes.
Or unhealthy buildings, of what it is to be a healthy building. 20 years ago, actually my training was around here. I was living in London, but my training was down Crowborough Way with Richard Cratemore, who's the local druid, dowser and geomancer. And so back in 2000s, I was inquiring with them about electromagnetic fields because it was known that extremely low frequency fields do have an effect on human biology. And what the ELFs are is your sockets, the 60 hertz system in a household. So the normal power supply, which is operating at 60 cycles a second.
Yes.
So that's our plug sockets, that's our lights, that's all that stuff. And the overhead pylons, which are extremely high frequency, they were also being implicated in cases of leukemia around the world.
Okay.
If you're living near one, under their influence. This is on because I'll have to do a demo.
Yeah.
Looking at the phone. Then we'll walk the talk. So the low frequency stuff in houses was known to be having an effect, and so I was interested in that. And in the 2000s, it was the advent of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, mobile phones. So we thought about it at the time, and the consensus was that it was very low power, therefore it was probably okay. This was even dowsers, in contemplating it. But over time, of course, that satisfied me for a while. And then 18 years later, I came across Sasha Stone's documentary called 5G Apocalypse, which I thought was going to be a bit hyperbolic and theatrical, but actually, to be fair, it wasn't. It was fairly sober. And I don't know, really what side he plays for, but like him or not, he's a Marmite character, but his information is often very good, and I found the film very informative, but it at least stimulated me to then go back and look into the topic myself again, to update myself. So if it was a double bluff, a bit of spin, then it backfired, because it got me interested, and it's been really helpful for architecture and for general life. So, as Daniel will know, we've kind of been the boiling frogs for the last 18 years, as this technology has grown. And
so we are the frogs that are being boiled.
Yes.
Well, everything that lives is in that boiling pot, and it started off so gently and in such a mild temperature that none of us noticed.
So why would they want us to have this in our homes if it's going to affect them negatively too?
Well, that's where I would draw it back from. It doesn't need to be a big conspiracy. It can just be a typical case of industrial malfeasance, and it's happened every single time. And that's just human nature. We invent something new and fancy, we think it's really exciting, we rush ahead, we start using it without due diligence. There's a long history since the Industrial Revolution of that. There was workhouses, there was pollution, particulate pollution, there was DDT, there was thalidomide, there was fluoroscopes where they would measure children's feet with x-rays, to get their shoe size. Isn't that incredible? Do you? Yeah. What was it, 50s, 60s? It took 30 to 50 years to recognise that danger, which is clear and present, x-rays, and then to regulate and say, no, Clarks, you need to use a little tape and a slidey bar. So little outliers like that, but the better known things like asbestos.
Oh yes, that wasn't good, was it?
And way before then, women were using makeup with lead. Contained lead.
Yes.
And hatters were making their hats stiff with mercury, which is why they coined the phrase the Mad Hatters, because they all went completely insane because of the mercury toxicity.
And women used to drop belladonna in their eyes as well, and to make their pupils. And that's really poisonous.
And now we've got Botox, and it's
Botox poisonous.
It's not good for you. It's not good for people.
I mean,
it's nerve paralysis.
It's nerve paralysis. It depends how much you do, and I think of all the dreadful things that are going on in the world, if a woman is aware that it's not good for her, but it makes her incredibly happy to look that much smoother and younger, then maybe it kind of balances it out. Because being happy is also very healthy for you.
So I have it done about 3 times a year.
Okay, right, okay.
And fillers.
Fillers I don't think is so bad, although I don't know if they've put anything extra in them, but they're mainly hyaluronic acid, which is a natural constituent of the skin anyway, and so that can just be absorbed and metabolized. Botox is not so great, but
sliding scale. Risk-benefit analysis is what always has to be done.
Pretty much everything is bad for us.
No.
Puppies and kittens.
Puppies are good for us.
Yes, puppies are very good.
And kittens.
Did you hear that, Cosmo?
I had the biggest doggy cuddles this morning. Oh, delicious. I have 3 big dogs, and in the morning they demand attention. And I was trying to make my bed, and one of them, the youngest one, just jumped up on the bed off the mattress like, no, stroke me.
Oh,
it's so cute.
Oh, so lovely.
They are.
Yeah.
So you've got 3.
I have 3. I do.
I thought it was only 2 huskies.
So I have 2 huskies. I have a third husky Labrador Rottweiler, she is such a mix, a genetic mix. She's like, even though you touch wood, but up until now she's been like a bulldozer. She's so strong. It's amazing, and very affectionate. And you could walk through a field of sheep with her, with all the little lambs and the sheep buying away, and she'd just trot beside me saying, "Hello, mummy. I love you, mummy." So she's very unlike huskies.
Yes.
And we have also 2 small dogs in the house that belong to another family member, so we're a doggy household.
You're 5 dogs in total.
Yes.
God.
Sounds amazing.
It's never boring, never a dull moment. No, but going back to the EMF. So interestingly, we live in a village. People have been texting on our village WhatsApp in the last few days about the number of birds on their bird feeders and how the numbers have gone down so dramatically.
Oh, okay.
And wondering why this was. And I was wondering, before I spin off my 5 cents or 2 cents, what you thought. If you had any theories why there might be such a sharp decline.
It might be multiple factors,
Probably.
and
yes.
we really need to remember that in these circles where everybody tends to go for the easy kill of it's a conspiracy, and it's a one cause problem. It's not. I don't think life is that simple.
No, it's
at all.
never a singular strand, is
no,
it? There's always many things at play.
They call them confounding issues,
Yes.
confounding causes. So it's too shrill to, everybody blamed COVID on their particular bugbear. It's like COVID was 5G, COVID was Protestants, COVID was was Bill Gates, COVID was pharmaceutical companies, COVID was whatever their kind of particular bête noire is. You could just assign the blame, but it's probably actually a combination of all of those
yes.
things, apart from Protestants. And so with the 5G, with the COVID coronavirus thing, in fact, I googled myself last night because somebody was trying to find my address and couldn't find anything else. And one thing that came up was my submission to the government inquiry about 5G about 5 years ago. And on the top of it, they've prefaced it like full fact check, 5G coronavirus, no, it doesn't cause it. And of course, they have all this, watch out what you're about to read. And 5G coronavirus is an example of where extreme claims are made that
yes.
kind of undermine the sober arguments, which are scientifically evidence-based and credible. So 5G does not, in any form, was not the cause of coronavirus, and we kind of know that.
Yes.
But it was definitely 5G and all the other electrosmog are certainly exacerbating factors, because
yes.
it is known that chronic exposure to electrosmog does reduce your immune system. It does challenge the immune system, reduce your vitality. So of course you're going to then be more vulnerable to outlying pathogens or invaders, whatever it is. So yeah, there's a soft link,
yes.
but not a hard link, and it's too glib to blame it on that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think many of the awful things that have been happening to people, increases in Parkinson's, increases in cancers, increases in just things that obviously show a very weak immune system. Autoimmune disease, that's a perfect one, is usually due to a combination of factors, which is why it's so hard to just point your finger on one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I did read a fascinating summary of a study by a Greek professor whose name I'm not even going to try and pronounce.
No, Greek names are a bit beyond me.
He studied mice. They did a deliberate study where they put little cages of mice in antenna parks where you have like Wi-Fi antenna or EMF antenna.
Yes.
And they were on the ground, on the grass, and the exposure of the mice was normal ambient exposure, so it wasn't some crazy high exposure, but I guess it was pretty constant. And because mice reproduce every few months, if they have, food and a safe environment, it's much easier to test things on mice than on humans. And the first generation of mice, the mummy and daddy had a normal litter, and it was all full-sized, and everything was just as it should be. Then those kids, who also stayed living in the same antenna park, they also had litter, but their babies were smaller than they would normally be, and they were, on average, I don't know how many mice they had, they had quite a lot of pairs of mice to make it statistically relevant. They had fewer babies than the first litter and then normal. And on the third generation, only a few of them actually had babies. And the overwhelming majority of the third baby litters didn't have any babies. And the ones that did get born were kind of slightly autistic and had learning difficulties. And the only main influence, because I think the food they got was pretty clean and not genetically modified, was the constant background ambient man-made mobile radiation. And so obviously the mice are not men, but given that we do, that's a t-shirt, I think.
Mice not men. Yeah, we do share characteristics.
We do share characteristics. We use mice and rats so often in so many experiments. It's something to look out for.
Yes.
Yeah. Which segues nicely into the question about birds.
Exactly. Yes.
So small mammal, the bigger the mammal, the bigger the bird, the creature, the longer it takes for the effects to show.
To be visible, yeah.
So possibly decline in birds now could be other factors.
Like insects.
There's changing environments, changing ecosystems, lack of food. Insects
yes.
for sure.
Yes.
We can see how there's been a monstrous decline on our windscreens, famously.
Yes.
So when in the 80s, go to Cornwall, they're covered in flies.
Covered in bugs.
Come back now, nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
So
Yes, I
what's
remember that.
Yeah, there's a definite decline in insect populations, but that again is probably a combination of the agricultural chemicals and insecticides, isn't it?
I believe so. I
and-
mean, if I can
Yeah.
again interject, there is there's another kind of agreed consensus among sort of holistic scientists that repeated exposure to 3G and 4G and I guess 5G blocks certain detox enzymes in the body, and this is the same with little insects as well. And so even though they're exposed to they have been exposed to all these farming chemicals and pesticides for decades and decades, they used to be able to detox them. But then if you keep the insecticide and pesticide exposure the same, and then you add the EMF, suddenly they can't detox the way they used to, so those toxins accumulate in their little bodies. And then at some point it could be too much.
Yeah.
So our environment is becoming too toxic to live in for humans and animals on multiple strands, from multiple
Unless
strands.
maybe we change the frequencies of mobile phones or just use less of them. I'm not I don't know. But there are definitely frequencies out there that are good for us as well.
Yeah, but it's also a question. We're kind of on we need to define a few terms as well, don't we? Because as you said, you're not familiar with the topic at all.
No.
And so it comes cold and fast. So what is an electromagnetic field? So you've got a charge particle. If it's standing still, it's a charge, and it has an electric field and a magnetic field associated with it. That's kind of physics. So they're perpendicular.
Yes.
But when that charge moves, that becomes a radiating field just because it's moving through space. So that's electromagnetic radiation, is a moving charge, which could be a photon. So with electromagnetic waves, there's photons which are being directed towards a receiver by a radio transmitter. So you get a transmitter which kind of generates a signal with just nice clever physics, alternating charges, and then the field goes off. And the receiver is just a similar size antenna, and it just picks it up, it resonates in kind, and then a little device behind picks up and translates that signal into an intelligible message for us.
Okay.
So, and it's been going on for hundreds of years, Marconi and so on. So radio frequency, radio signals. So the only difference we're talking about between radio and TV waves is a slightly smaller wavelength. So there's less space between the peaks and the troughs of the wave.
Okay.
And a higher frequency. Because to all intents and purposes, the speed is the same, speed of light in this dimension, the speed of light. And so all you can alter is the wavelength and the frequency, so how long and fast the pulse is. So where 5G, 4G come on that spectrum is that we started with 1G, 2G at about 1.4 gigahertz, which is 1.4 billion cycles a second.
Yes.
TVs are right down here, like a million cycles a second. So you've got 1 billion for early mobile phones. Now we've got 2.5 billion cycles a second for 4G.
Okay.
So it's 2.4 gigahertz is the frequency. So that's the spectrum allocated by Ofcom and the government for the telecom companies to use in the airwaves on that spectrum. And then microwave ovens in your kitchen are 2.4 as well. It's the same as a 4G signal.
Okay.
So exactly the same frequency.
Been a bit concerned about microwaves for a number of years.
Yes.
I don't like them. I didn't have one in my house, in my old house.
Yeah. Well, there is a suspicion if you're heating up your food with microwave radiation. It's not, the word radiation can be misunderstood. It's not radioactive. It's not dangerous in that sense, and it's not dangerous to the food. It's just creating some kinetic movements in the food, and that creates heat, and that warms it up just by hitting it very hard and fast. And difference between a microwave oven and your phone is that the microwave power in the oven is 3,000 watts, whereas in your phone it's half a watt or milliwatts. It's way less. So power is an important factor.
Yes.
But power is the only thing that the regulators recognise as being able to cause an effect on biological systems. So the safety guidelines are not standards. The safety guidelines at the moment are based on the ability of a phone signal to heat you up, to heat your tissue. Yeah.
Yes, they are, and they're based on
very
decade-old research that was done on a dummy of an American soldier.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not even anyway.
Not
But
very representative.
because you say they, and I know this to be a fact, that they only the guidelines at the moment only accept any possible harm from heating. But in the same time, I recently heard that now that 5G is rolled out or starting to be rolled out, certain companies have patented 5G insecticides.
Really?
Yes. And and that loops in beautifully to why there's so few insects. Because
Yes.
I'm not as technical as you, so I could never describe the waves as beautifully as you have. But 5G uses millimeter waves, right?
Yeah.
They're much smaller.
Yeah, so
the
waves.
distance between the peak and the trough, which in 2G and 3G was like meters,
Yeah.
Yeah.
with 5G, it's millimeters.
Yeah.
So it's almost impossible for insects to escape, to dodge the waves, because they're only millimeters, so you will get hit by them. And a bee...
There'll be a direct resonance.
Yeah, there'll be a
Bees.
direct resonance.
And
Without bees,
I know. Bees are so important on
Yes.
so many levels. And for example, bees have a device in their a natural characteristic in their brains that allows them to navigate and fly the Earth's surface and know where they are, to geolocate at all times. It's brilliant. And it's that little area in their brain has huge amounts of minerals. So I guess they somehow connect with the Earth's magnetic surface to geolocate themselves. And the 5G heats that up, heats that area up, and it fries their brains and they die. And that's scientifically demonstrated. Which, again, loops back into the fact that different companies have actually patented. Anybody can go onto the UK Patent Office and check, Google 5G insecticides.
maybe we can put that as a link in in the description.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So that is a cause for concern. And what do birds eat? Birds eat insects. And without a diversity of insects, they starve.
Yeah.
You can't just feed from a few nice people's bird feeders.
And then there's going to be the animals that feed on the birds. They're not going to have a food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's going to affect the entire food chain.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you take out that primary level of food source, the apex predators, you have nothing, the chain is broken. Yeah.
So is there a solution?
Well, the obvious one is to apply a precautionary principle to new technical innovation and say let's sort of dip our toes in the water and test it a bit first. But as we said earlier, humans don't do that. We learn after the event. So this solution is probably to learn the hard way. And the pattern with tobacco, it took 3 generations to recognise and regulate. And the slippery eel, it's called the plausible deniability thing about 4G, 5G or microwave radiation, is that you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't hear it. And so it's very difficult for us all to actually remember that it's all happening around our environment. Whereas with smoking and all that stuff, you could at least smell it, see it, whatever.
Yes.
And the super smogs of cities in the Industrial Revolution, it was palpable. And so the Air Quality Acts were passed to eventually then clean all that up. So the acts do follow, and I'm sure they will for this.
Yes.
But how long will it take? It's already been 130 years since it was first mooted as an issue. So that's an insanely long time, isn't it? And we're all the boiling frogs in that period of time. And the other plausible deniability thing about the microwave smog is that it's a slightly more insidious toxin in that it takes a long time to show a deleterious effect. So it can be 20 years, and with the mice, generations till we see really obvious mutations. But in our own health in one lifetime, it can take 30 years for the decline to become apparent. But then it will become apparent, a bit like the COVID stuff, in a whole variety of symptoms. So it's difficult to pinpoint a cause and an effect.
Yes.
Partly the time, partly the symptomology. And so it's like, well, prove it. And you kind of can't in that sense.
Because it's always a complex, it's always a combination of factors. Yes.
Yeah. But they do know the mechanisms.
Yes.
They do know
there are great scientists out there who know the mechanisms of harm. There's a professor called Martin Pall. Martin Pall, an American professor who's done so many tests and written whole numbers of papers. We can maybe provide his link as well.
Yes.
And he describes beautifully the mechanisms of harm of 3Gs, 4Gs and 5Gs. And he is very, he's quite pessimistic.
He was, wasn't he? Yeah, he said it's going to be generational collapse. one generation if we don't stop.
Yeah.
But his thing was interesting. Everyone vaguely medically minded was the voltage gated channels,
Calcium
wasn't
channels,
it, in
yes.
the cells. So all our cell membranes have got little single charge monitored gates which
Yes.
let
Around them.
around thousands and millions
Yes,
of them, aren't there,
yes.
around every cell membrane. It's amazing. There are different ones activated by different things, but these ones are voltage gated instead of chemical gated or other things. So these little single charges of the gatekeepers on all these little gateways, and so it's a plus or a minus, and then so the body knows how to turn those on and off with the right signalling. Change the plus to a minus, so the gate will open, let calcium in, or potassium, or sodium.
And the body uses very tiny charges, doesn't it?
Tiny, yeah, it's amazing. So sensitive. And he says the incoming EMFs are 7.2 million times. No, these cell membranes are 7.2 million times more sensitive as single charge groups than any other membrane in the body. So they're exquisitely sensitive. And he's found that if they're chronically exposed to incoming microwave radiation, it confuses the signalling. And predominantly the calcium gate gets disrupted and lets too much calcium into the cell. And then there's a whole chain reaction of effects from too much calcium in a cell, which in the end leads to chronic inflammation,
Yes.
as well as psychological problems as well. So it's well known that chain reaction with whatever toxic input, but in this one it's EMFs. So they're starting to see, well, certainly the chain of effects, and the government still say, well, there's obviously no risk from microwave radiation because there are no mechanisms understood. Which is partly not true because they are increasingly being understood,
Yes.
and partly a nonsensical argument. It's like just because you don't understand how something is happening doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yes.
I mean, for example, directly in parallel with the increase in our general exposure to mobile radiation, the incidence in the Western world, or in the countries where the radiation has gone up so much, the increase in dementia and Alzheimer's, so in neurological disease, and also in learning difficulties and autism with kids, has gone up exponentially. I think now it's increased around something, don't quote me, but it's about 700%, so sevenfold in 20 years.
I've noticed that because everybody's child, or at least one child in a household, has got a neurodiversity.
Yeah. Again, probably multiple factors.
Yes, definitely. I'm sure multiple factors.
Yes.
But a key factor seems to be the addition of the mobile frequencies.
Yes.
Straws and camels' backs.
Yeah,
really.
exactly. Yes.
It's like we can cope. Our adaptive stress levels are pretty good as humans, and we can. So we'll talk about mitigation and health, preserving health as well. But first, let's just define 5G because it's again massively misrepresented in the more extreme medias on both sides. So 5G is simply the next generation, and it's a step up in frequency. So the spectrum has been widened, basically to allow more bandwidth, which means more information can be passed down the radio waves. So 4G frequencies, for example, are 2.4, like the microwave oven, but much lower power, up to 3.6 gigahertz. So that was a spectrum that had license until recently. They're now licensing up to 7 gigahertz, 8 gigahertz, so the next tranche. That's where it becomes more millimeter wavelength.
Yes.
So 4G is about that wavelength at the moment. So mechanical resonance, size of a head, size of organs. You've got mechanical resonance, which is what causes thermal effects. So they do recognise that. But they say, oh, it's such low power, it's not causing any thermal effect.
Yeah.
But there are other effects. So 5G will then eventually, in America, it's licensed up to 60 or 90 gigahertz.
Yes.
So those are literally millimeter waves.
Yeah.
So it's just the faster the radiation is, the smaller the wavelength. So that's one feature of 5G. It's a very much faster frequency, so it's a smaller wavelength. And the other thing is that the way it's transmitted is completely different to 4G. So 4G was like dropping a pebble in water, you get concentric rings of ripples going out. So it radiates in all directions from a mast. So wherever your phone is in that soup of information, you pick up what's for you. And so in some ways that's quite inefficient. Like you're broadcasting Lucy's message to the entire county in 360 degrees, but the half a degree you inhabit is actually where it's useful. So it makes sense. You focus that, you send it just to Lucy.
Yeah.
So it's called collimated beams or phased array transmission. So they steer your signal just to your phone
Yeah.
using a different design of antenna. So instead of omnidirectional, which was 4G,
Yeah.
is directional. So you get all these directional signals being fired around, which in some ways sounds efficient and quite clever. It's very clever. It's brilliant. And boys with toys. Actually, Sussex University are pioneering 6G and so on, using even higher frequencies and more advanced optics for that. And they think it's safe. And in some ways, in small doses, fine. Everything's fine in small doses.
Yeah.
But it's it falls foul of their claims that this is more efficient and safer. It falls foul also of Jevons paradox, which is where you increase the capacity of a system, then the system will increase to fill the capacity.
Yes.
So, like the M25,
Yes.
it's a bit congested with 1 or 2 lanes. So, okay, we're going to ease that and build 6 lanes, and it'll be fine, lots of space.
Yeah.
But of course, it fills up because it can.
Yes.
Nature abhors a vacuum. So the same with the 5G phased array. Great, they can now do 1 million different signals per square kilometre instead of, say, 100,000. And so you've got 1 million more signals, 1,000 more signals than you did before. So it hasn't really decreased the energy use of the system, because you've increased the usage by 1,000 times. So it's a non-argument.
Isn't it right that conspiracy theorists will then say, yes, but the thing is, because now it's phased array and targeted, if some nasty person wanted to target some person on the street and bombard them with rays from all sides, it would be much easier now.
Yeah, and I think that that could be done and was being done anyway. But it's now arguably a lot easier. So I think there is legitimate concern for security there too. And also having more of a concentrated beam coming to your device is going to be a stronger pulse.
Yes, exactly.
And it has to go through you.
Yes.
They've got Apple designed 16 antennas in their 5G phones because they've got this pesky thing called body blocking, where if your hand is too much over the antennas, it's going to block off some of them or interfere with some of them. So you have to have a few that might be free of your grip. So it kind of gives the game away a bit. So we get in the way, and it's really annoying. Don't want users in the way. So they know that we absorb it. They know that we get in the way. And then the other factor with the proliferation of devices, which again is just competitive modern market commercialism, is that you get a densification of the microwave smog, and then with that you also get reflections, hotspots, zones where the amplitude is massively increased with constructive interference, and you can't predict those. So some people are going to be living, sleeping, sitting, whatever, in those areas without realising.
So like living in London?
Yeah, there are already cases of hotspots, which are kind of anomalies, because it's so complicated what's bouncing around everywhere. You can't say where it's going to happen. And people have been burnt. But there'll be other more insidious effects where you're sleeping in a hotspot and you've got no idea until you've got weird cancers, probably 10 years' time.
Or you just can't sleep properly. You can't sleep properly.
And that causes adaptive stress as well. So that is adaptive stress. You can't sleep. So the whole thing, becomes very complex. How to not be too afraid is just to start at home.
Yes.
So there are a lot of people. I am an advocate of not proselytising, getting on soapbox and telling people until they get really fed up. But great to give a message once, because there'll be people like you who just had no idea, and like me 5 years ago, I had no idea. But I'm bloody grateful that some friend, unsolicited, sent me this link to 5G Apocalypse, and I opened it. We're allowed to be curious, and we're allowed to listen.
At the moment we are, anyway.
Yeah. We grant ourselves that free will. And so for people like yourselves who are actually interested in solutions, we should share them. And the first thing for me is not to dip into fear, because that's really dangerous.
Yeah, fear's not good.
Not good, because your whole system just collapses energetically then anyway. But to just be pragmatic and take sensible steps in your own house. So to recognise the sources of microwave radiation, and not to blame them as being big conspirators to kill you, but just their devices of modern life. So let's just reduce them. So one hack is at night time, turn off your Wi-Fi.
Okay, what about people that listen to meditations and things in bed?
No, I know,
when they go to bed.
It's paradoxical, isn't it?
Well, maybe you just have a normal
CD
tape
player.
recorder or CD player that you plug into the wall and have a CD in there.
Oh, that's it. Yes.
Yeah.
Go back to basics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think have a dirt cheap
Yeah,
CD
radio.
Walkman with batteries in it.
Yes.
I think you can get them for
Yeah.
next to nothing on eBay.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, you can. There's that and
Yeah.
radios.
Yeah.
Lots, not too bad. Or downloads. A lot of people
Oh,
downloaded
downloads.
stuff off
Yes.
Spotify, I guess, and you store that and you just press play at night with your phone. Your phone can be in. Yeah.
We disagree on this.
Which?
The airplane mode
mode.
is safe.
It's safer. It's not. It doesn't emit, but there are other lower levels of. It can still receive
This is
things.
when it's possible that that's correct. It's because it definitely doesn't emit the way it would otherwise.
No, it goes.
But when
silent.
we tested people who were EMF sensitive,
Yeah.
and you test things like their pulse and other body parameters, when somebody's behind them with a mobile phone either off entirely or emitting normally or in airplane mode, and you test several people to try and make it as neutral as possible, the ones who were sensitive reacted just as badly to airplane mode. Some reacted worse to airplane mode than to normal. So my recommendation would be, ideally, it's not complicated.
Totally off.
Turn off the mobile phone entirely, switch off the Wi-Fi completely, make sure that you Alexa is fast asleep and unplugged, and then get yourself a little tape recorder or a radio or old-fashioned CD player and listen to whatever lovely meditation you want to on an old-fashioned analog device, and keep all the digital devices fast asleep for daytime, because when you're awake your body is primed to defend itself, and all our brilliant physiology is there to defend ourselves from too much harm. But at night the body focuses on internal repair, and it kind of takes away the watchmen from the gates and the guys who will say do not enter. And if you sleep with Wi-Fi or your mobile phone right beside you, it changes the frequency of your brain waves. And we all want deep, restful sleep, the deep delta waves that give us dreams and that allow us to really, really restore our bodies. And scientists have agreed that if you have Wi-Fi around you when you're sleeping, your body naturally wants to mimic the 2.4 gigahertz and doesn't actually find it easy to get to the deep waves, and usually it doesn't make it.
Okay.
And long term that will have health effects, because we need to regenerate and detox at night, and if for years and years and years we're not detoxing, toxins build up, you age more quickly, and other things can hit you. So at night you really want to try to become old-fashioned and have everything off, everything digital off, and just use it again in the daytime.
That's a good tip, that one.
Because
turn
that's
it all off at
achievable by
night,
every single person, apart from their neighbours. They
that's
say,
what
well,
I was
but I can't
thinking.
control my neighbours. But that's the case of where don't get interfere. Change what you can, and have the wisdom not to mind about what you can't. Or that
if you can afford it, buy yourself a sleep canopy. Because they make these big, like baldachin, beautiful netting bed covers that look like mosquito nets, but they're made of metals like silver, very fine.
Silver
And as long as
fabric.
you ground the net, so you have to stick an alligator clip on it and put a wire outside or to some electric plug. You'll know more about how to do this than I do. But you have to basically release the charge that gets caught on the net and take it away somewhere safe. Then inside the net, you have almost no man-made radiation at all, and you can sleep even if you live in a flat on the 5th floor with 80 different Wi-Fi signals all around you. So it does cost money, but it's certainly doable.
So how much is one of these nets?
They're about 400 quid, aren't they? Maybe.
Between 400 and 600, depending what you get. I
You
think.
just wrap them underneath as well.
Yes.
So then at least in London tower blocks where you are surrounded, as a precautionary approach, if you want to, that is a solution.
I've seen grounding blankets as well. Are they a similar thing?
Well, they're for more the electric fields, aren't they? The lower frequency. But I hear very varied advice about that. I don't know if you do, but it can go wrong.
Yes.
So
I haven't used one myself, so it's hard to for me to give an opinion. But if you buy a good quality one, it's probably harmonises the electric waves you're lying on.
It depends. The weakness I gather is from the house's own wiring system. If you've got your grounding mat plugged in, because you plug it in with a plastic pin, which for the live and the neutral, but the metal is to the earth. But often people's earthing systems in their houses are not correct. They've got anomalous waves coming in from the grid and from the earth as well, and that can then be conducted into the grounding sheet and then into you when you're sleeping.
Right. So in that case, you'd better not have one at all.
It's not worth risking often. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. But the canopy things, which you don't actually have to plug in either. It can just absorb the higher frequency stuff anyway. They'll just absorb it. But good, yeah, no harm from that.
Because my daughter actually sleeps with her mobile phone under her pillow.
Oh my god. Yeah. Well, do tell her not to.
She won't listen to me.
There's the trouble, they don't want to listen.
There are
They
stories
don't want to hear it.
irreparable damage
Yes.
is happening to people in their 20s.
Yes.
And they regret it massively. Because there's a certain stage, isn't there? You just can't repair. They get.
Well, their brain cells get seriously damaged.
Yeah.
I can see that in her. Yeah.
I mean, there are.
Sorry, I shouldn't make.
No, but I mean,
It's worrying.
It's worrying, especially as so many young people are so independent, and I understand it, and they just don't want to listen. But there are so many cases of young women who carry their mobile phones in their bras.
Yeah.
Apparently, you can even buy bras with a mobile phone pocket.
Well, that's not good because of the radiations.
They all,
the chances
not
of
they
breast
all.
cancer.
That's an exaggeration. Many of these women, a few years later, develop breast cancer in exactly the spot. Just underneath the spot, they had the mobile phone. There are so many cases. It's now a scientific fact. It's not. People don't even argue about it.
And they're not indemnified by the mobile phone companies because the warranty, the legal information in your phone, if you look it up, says that this should not be used within 10 millimeters of the skin.
So, but they're in our hands.
Exactly.
They rest on our hands.
So that's their get out of jail free card.
Yes.
So but you didn't comply with our conditions. You had it in your pocket. No, that was going to cause cancer. We told you not to. Yeah.
So don't touch your phone.
No.
Never
No,
touch your
so
phone.
this is a tip.
Never touch your phone.
Well, you can. Yeah, it's to be sensible. But if you're making a long call, try definitely not like this.
Yes,
Because that's the thermal effect. That's acknowledged even in the mainstream. That's the thermal microwave heating effect. And the infrared images of brain is dissected with scans showing that. And with children, it's a lot worse because the skulls are thinner, the brains are younger. It goes right through. And heats up tissue. That's heating protein structures in your body. Not good. It's like an egg. So don't do that. And I think most people realise that now. But even that is still your hands, your blood is all exquisitely sensitive, and we won't feel it necessarily, but over time it's a deleterious adaptive stress. So
and especially when you can
exactly. It's hands-free mic and a hands-free on the table or in the car, because distance does help. Because it's not always about intensity, but intensity, the power is obviously a factor. So keep it as far away. The strength falls off with the inverse square law, so quite quickly the power density falls off. The other influences don't necessarily, but that's why it's all very complex. There are new academic inquiries coming up all the time, aren't there? There's quantum electrobiology, which is a new field, and so they're starting to understand how some of the mechanisms work through quantum electrodynamic effects, which are not recognised by conventional physics because it's a new arena. So we will understand, won't we, as time goes on?
Yeah.
And we're understanding more and more. But at the moment, it doesn't fit, I don't believe, mainstream commercial interests to have this information broadcast widely.
No.
Yes.
And so science is always a few steps ahead of what's publicly known.
Yeah.
And I also, again, this is just my opinion, I got the impression, speaking about all the birds and the declining birds, that many people are very attached to their mobile phones. They love their Wi-Fi's. Maybe they've even made friends with their Alexa and they love their Alexa. So they like all these things.
Yeah.
And the thought that having these things could be hurting the birds and the bees is unwelcome to them because it interferes with their lifestyle and the things they've become to enjoy. So they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is a huge risk in people's health.
Yeah.
Because if something is hurting you just because you don't want to know, ain't going to make it any better.
Right.
And especially if you love the animals and you love the environment, then don't think about yourself, think about the environment, but take an interest. There's so much really good data out there. There's a website, I think they're called the Environmental Health Trust. I haven't looked at them for a while, but they have a lot of research about decline in all sorts of species and the link to mobile radiation and exactly how that works.
Yes.
So yes, just obviously none of us find it easy to get around in the modern world without having a mobile phone, but have yours off most of the time.
Yes.
You know, it's difficult if you have tiny children, because you always want it on just in case she needs to phone you. But then I ask myself, what did people do 80 years ago? No, less than that. It must be
20
40.
years ago. 20.
20. Well, no. Well, we still had phones 20 years ago, but 40 years
Not
ago.
mobiles.
No mobiles. Okay. Let's say 30 years ago. There were no mobiles. There were landlines.
Yes.
There were no mobile phones. Children were fine.
Well, I didn't even have a landline when my eldest daughter was born. I had to go to the payphone around the corner if I needed to call anybody.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. And we survived.
Exactly. We did. We
Yes.
survived. Yeah. So yeah, I just use mobile phones less.
Yes. We don't need to be available for social media and text messages and phone calls 24 hours a day.
I agree.
No.
They're just nice to have, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is incredible stuff. But I haven't travelled much recently, but went away in January just now, and that was to Morocco, and previous to that to Italy, and just realised just for those couple of weeks how completely dependent we are as a traveller.
Yeah.
By choice or also by circumstance on our phones. For booking things, for booking your hotels, for looking at the maps, for looking at the timetables, for hiring the car, for getting to the airport, checking in.
Yeah,
you know,
access to your bank account.
Yeah, paying for stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I can't do that on my phone. Haven't tried. But yeah, cash is always better.
Yes, I always use cash.
But all these things, as a traveller, this is indispensable. It'd be really hard.
It's become indispensable.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It'd be really hard to travel without it, wouldn't it? Or a lot harder. So yeah, so it's quite so what do you do about it? I think, the genie is out of the bottle, and we are charging full steam ahead with this stuff.
Yeah.
And let's just hope that, other technologies can come in to help to mitigate the effects. I don't know about nature. Nature does adapt. Steiner was a bit brutal about it. Do you know what Steiner said?
Tell me what he said.
He said this electronic age, it will come upon us, and it will be
Disaster.
it will be a chapter for mankind, and it will result in the death of thousands of species and
happened already.
Irreparable harm to the human race.
Yes.
And the students were like, but that sounds a bit kind of dire. Isn't life all about love? And he said, but it's just the way it is, and new species will arise.
Yes.
So it was like, let them all die. New ones will come. So quite dispassionate and probably quite realistic. But nature is obviously king at adaptation. When ecosystems do change, they're part of life. But it's horrible to think that we're the catalysts of that.
And in my dream world, which at the moment is just a dream world, people would not have mobile phones. We would have ultra fast, incredibly fast computers that use fibre optic.
Yeah.
That's very safe, very fast, carries massive information. There'll be available terminals everywhere, so you can check in all that stuff. But you just log in on a fixed device that's connected with a cable, and there is no use whatsoever of beams and radiation. You would still have all the data you want, all the information, but you wouldn't be killing the world anymore.
Yeah, that sounds like a better way forward.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit simplistic, but why not?
Yeah. Anything for a better world, right?
Or are there better frequencies that could be used?
Apparently there are. I don't know, but apparently there are better frequencies.
Because as you know, some of the causes of the adaptive stress, the features of the wave, not just frequency, because that's a number in a sense to the body, but it's the quality of the wave, or the shape of the wave. So the modulation, so it's pulsed and it's modulated, which is the way it's shaped to carry the information. The modulation these days for packing even more information into one signal is incredibly complex. It's overlaid various different systems, and that makes a lot of noise, and that's what causes the adaptive stress. And this is the US military who found this out. The adaptive stress is caused to the soldiers in Iraq from all the Wi-Fi in their helmets and blah blah blah, by this jagged sawtooth pulsed signal. And it's like Chinese drip torture. It's like going like that. It's like your body's having to deal with that. So I'll play it. So someone
Oh yes, do, because this is what our body has to listen to, but we don't hear it with our ears. But ourselves, they definitely get it.
And now it's gone. When you hear
while
it,
you're
it's
looking.
like a Geiger counter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what little smart meters do, because they send information about your electricity use 100 times a day. Go on.
Yeah, no, I was dead set about smart meters right from the off.
Is innocently sitting here.
Okay,
Direction through those doors.
come on.
Volume up. You can hear the dit, which is the frequency transmission from the wireless modem. As we head back into the office here, you can see the readings picking up.
So that's a. I can show you much more annoying sounds than that, but that's just the background in his house. That's just the Wi-Fi in the background, just waiting to play. And you see, it sounds like a Geiger counter because it's basically Geiger counters pick up the ionizing spectrum radiation, like super high frequency gamma rays, radioactivity, and play it back with that noise. But so this is just tuning into a lower end of the spectrum, and it's the same enervating noise. So yeah, I think an audible expression like that's quite telling because it's like that's what the body's hearing,
and that's
but
just
we're not
from
hearing it.
one
That's
Wi-Fi system.
Just one Wi-Fi.
So that's not the noise emitted by 20 mobile phones when you're walking down the street or in an office.
Oh yes, I've got that here.
So there's a yes, London would be great.
Yeah,
So
or
there's
in
a
a family home where you've got, say, like 2 kids that have got phones
Yes.
And tablets,
iPads
yes.
and tablets.
Here we are.
Gosh, that's a horrible sound.
Yeah, that's just me in London one day in Crystal Palace. Yeah, horrible sound.
Gosh.
Yeah, so people's houses sound way worse than that nowadays. Deloitte's published a study last year suggesting that we've now got on average 20 radio frequency emitting devices in a normal household. So
That's shocking.
It is
20.
because we're bringing them in one by one.
Yes,
People have their Fitbits, ironically, to measure their health, and they're just pulsing their blood, their arteries all the time. You've got the Fitbits, you've got the wireless mice and keyboards as well, and then wireless printers and washing machines and TVs and blah blah blah. So, but you can turn. I've got wired everything because I was getting information in my hands from wireless mice. It just builds up. Everybody has their tolerance, so you don't know when it's going to hit.
Everybody has wireless earphones these days.
Yeah, I don't use those. I didn't like the idea of having things in my ears.
No, because it
because
goes
it's
straight into your
radiation
brain.
straight into your brain.
Yeah, they actually are. They're not just receiving; they're two-way.
Yeah.
I've got a video yesterday of that, just recording the radiation coming out. Yeah, it's just not going to be a good idea, is it? So at least, some of these things might turn out to be more benign than we fear, but what if they don't?
Yes.
Well, we know that a lot of them don't from all the studies, but what if they don't? I think a precautionary approach to new tech is so sensible.
Approach is very sensible.
You can't lose, can you?
Yes. No, not at all. I know some therapists who work with autistic children.
Yes.
And feedback from these individual therapists was that if they managed to protect the autistic kids from man-made EMF, so they were able to have removed the Wi-Fi from wherever they were living and just have Ethernet cables everywhere, and the child didn't have access to a mobile phone, which is very difficult sometimes because they want them, and especially when they slept, they were completely protected. Their symptoms, just by doing that, always got better. So they were still on the spectrum. So I'm not saying it's Wi-Fi, but I am saying clearly with a sensitive body or a sensitive child, having Wi-Fi around them aggravated their symptoms.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you protected them from Wi-Fi, their symptoms got much better. So that's interesting.
So we need to protect our children from the radiation.
And as Nick was saying, Ollie was saying, sorry.
Okay.
They have thinner brains, thinner skulls.
Yeah.
They're smaller brains. They have more, the ratio of liquid to solid matter in a child's body is bigger, it's more liquid, and so they have far more potential to resonate with any mobile device, so they need to be protected more than we need to be protected.
Yes. That makes sense because they're developing and growing.
Yeah, one interesting book is Dr. Robert Becker. You've heard of him, Dr. Robert Becker. He was writing in the 80s. His books were called Cross Currents and also The Body Electric. And so he was already anticipating in 1984, the second one was written, that if we did launch mobile technology, phone technology on society, there would be untold amounts of health effects that we can't predict. So this was in the 80s, so it was really 10 years hence is when it started. And lots of predictions already seeming to come true. But the message from his book was also just explaining how exquisitely electronic our body is. And so he could see with his experiments in currents of injury, and also just microcurrents and microcurrent therapy, because it can be used beneficially, electricity, how all these little charge groups in the body and all these systems could be affected by either deliberately or non-deliberately induced radiation. And it sort of makes sense, you know, we're super electronic, so you've got some arbitrary barrage of electronic signals being thrown at us all the time. Something's going to get confused, and something's going to be put out of whack,
Yes.
balance.
It's like you're trying to listen to a beautiful violin player who's playing
Yeah.
this gorgeous solo,
There's a trumpet
and then
in the
there's a
background.
trumpet in the background, and somebody comes and bashes a drum, and
Yeah.
then some people come running past screaming, and you're trying to focus on the violin, but you can't
Yeah,
anymore
yeah.
because there's this barrage of other different noise from all sides. It's kind of the same thing with our body's electric mechanisms.
Good analogy. Yeah. So yeah, he's worth reading. How are we doing with the
Yes.
55?
So, so let's have a couple of closing thoughts from you, Oliver.
Don't fall into fear.
Yes.
If you can't change something, just send it love and positivity, and be really practical, sensible, and not too extreme about any beliefs either. You know, there's a whole mix of realities
it's
going
important
on.
not to be extreme.
It's not them and us at all.
Yeah.
You know, we make these choices. We bought our phones.
Exactly.
You know, we didn't have to.
Yes.
So if there's a they, maybe they know how to sell things, but I think it's too glib sometimes. And
because I often fall back to the they're doing it to us.
No.
Actually, no, we have a choice in whether we take part in this.
And also we're just part of a massive picture of the journey of mankind. As Steiner says, it is a chapter in mankind's journey. We descend to the 8th sphere, you know, this subnormal sphere of electronic life, of digital realities. You know, and we have to learn from that.
Yes.
And we will. And so just to try and navigate that journey above the waves and not below them.
Yes.
And with information we can do that. Yeah.
It's like
And to keep healthy, to walk, to ground yourself, to be in the sun, to eat good food, and to keep clean.
all
So
of that.
our plumbing is clean, our electrics are clean, our vitality is strong, and then you know you're much more bomb-proof anyway.
You're much more resilient than anyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Oliver. And if you like what we're doing here, please press subscribe. If you don't, leave a comment and we'll get back to you.
I do have a website.
Oh, yes.
So for the source of a lot of this stuff, also
Yes.
the up-to-date information on UK legal challenges and around the world, RF Info, so radio frequency info, rfinfo.co.uk.
Okay. And we will put the links in the description.
We will.
Excellent. So, goodbye from me.
Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.